This video is going to be about multiple night processing in DeepSkyStacker. In this case, it's going to be M31. And I'm also going to kind of do a little introduction to a program called Graxpert that removes gradient. So, as you can see here, this is the folder where I've got all my images I took, and the first night was back in August of last year, 2022, and then I went, a little over a month, and did a couple nights in a row in early October, and then a little later October, and then one in November, and then another one here in November of this year. Now, one of the issues you run into when you do something like this is the temperature changes a lot depending on when you're imaging, because obviously August was pretty warm, and then you go into kind of late November, you could have a huge difference in your temperature. So I have different dark frames, and if you're going to try to process all of these into one image, you need to try to kind of balance them out. And DeepSkyStacker will allow you to do that by putting them in different groups. So I just went through my images and looked at the little document sheet I made, and my temperatures varied by 29 degrees between August and late November. So I had one night where the temperature was about 67, then another night 53, another night 55, another night 59, then a night at 42, then 45, and then the coldest night was 38 degrees. This is one of the main reasons why a lot of people who buy the newer cameras buy a cooled camera. They can set it to the same temperature every night. They usually go down to 0 or even 15 or 20 degrees below 0 Celsius. So they get it quite a bit cooler. And mine, since this is just a DSLR, I just go with whatever the ambient temperature is, and it varies some through the night too. On these particular nights it didn't move around a whole lot because I was only out there a couple hours each night. But some nights, it could change 10 or 15 degrees if you're, or more, if you're taking pictures all night long. So when I start loading my images into DeepSkyStacker, the first bunch go into what's called the main group down here at the bottom. And the main group is just files that end up in every single one of these images. And then after I fill this tab, it'll keep giving me new tabs for group 1, group 2, and so on. So I'll put all the darks and lights in separate ones. So what I'm going to do is, since my bias frames and my flat frames are the same for everything, I'll just go ahead and put them in first in the main group. So go up here and go to flats. And I've got a master folder of flats that I made for my 300mm lens. And I haven't mentioned it yet out loud here, but I'm doing this with a Nikon D50 camera. And this is my stock one. If you've watched any of my other stuff, I also made one full spectrum that I experiment with. But for something like this, I've been doing all stock. So next we'll go for the bias frames, and we've got to find the right camera real quick. And okay, if you notice here, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got multiple bias folders. I've got some at ISO 200 for my stock camera and ISO 200 for the full spectrum, and then the same with ISO 400. So I'll open up my stock camera at ISO 400. Which, by the way, I was exposing my light frames for M31 at 5 minutes on ISO 400, of course, and I do it on RAW as well. So now that I've got some images here in the main group, it's given me another tab, which is group 1 down here, and this is going to be night number 1, which would be the August 27th, I believe is what it was. So we'll get these, and you can see I got darks and lights for each night. And in a couple of these nights, I actually copied over one or more of the dark frames to the next night because the temperature only varied by a degree or two. So then I'll get my darks for group 1. Okay, so now I can go to group 2 for my next night, which would be in early October. See, we'll go back here, yeah, October 1. And yeah, light frames. You can see here it says October 2, it's after midnight. I date them by whatever evening I'm going outside. And then we'll do dark frames for that same night. So next, of course, I'll go to group number 3. And this will be October 2nd, which these two nights the temperature was very close to the same. You can see I got a different number of lights for each night. Some nights the weather cooperated and what have you. So I need darks for that night. Now we'll get some lights for group number 4. Yeah, I gotta make sure I gotta cancel, get ahead of myself. Group 4. This is where you gotta pay attention. It's easy to make a little mistake when you're doing this. So October 21. Okay, and then darks for that night. And then we'll go into our next night. So now I'm up to October 26th. Darks for that night. And then we'll go up to November here in a sec. We'll get the lights for November 5 of this year. And darks, same night. Now we go up to our group 7 night there. We're up to the 22nd, last year. I think I'm up to around 12 hours of total light for this. So that's kind of interesting. It's hoping to get a lot better results as I go along. I'm still learning, and sometimes I find that I want too much when I add another night or two, and I end up over processing it, and sometimes it doesn't look so hot. But if you play with it and be careful, you get some pretty nice looking images. Okay, so now that I've got everything loaded into each of its groups, I need to make sure everything's been checked, because when I register them, it's going to register the checked pictures. So I'll go check all for the main group, same for one, and do that all the way through. Okay, so I did that with all my groups. So now I'm going to go to register checked pictures. Before I do that, I'll show, in case you haven't seen this, you can do a preview on here. And this shows you an unstretched image, and you can give it some stretch for viewing purposes. It's not supposed to affect what you have for stacking. And of course, this is just one of the light frames without any flats or darks or anything. I'll bring it up a little brighter here for a second. Trying to show the vignetting. You kind of see that the corners get darkened. So we'll do our register checked pictures. And then I'm going to OK. And it's going to show me all the steps of the stacking. So here I've got 2 hours and 31 minutes, which would be night 1, I guess, there. And then next night must not have had quite as good a weather. It says I only have that 35 minutes. I think that must be, I'll see what I can figure out about that, because I didn't have a night that short, I didn't think, but I must have. Yeah, that must have been a night when I had clouds roll in or something, or maybe I got a late start. Here I've got an hour and 15 minutes that night, hour and 55, hour and 40, hour and 46, 221, 6 minutes. This one here is because I had a long exposure. If you notice down here, I don't know if you can read it, but it says in red, warning, exposure time not matching with light frames. And oh, it says I got 6.5 minutes. And that does not match up with the other lights or with the darks. Now, I'm dumb and greedy, I guess, because I'm leaving it in there. Some people would definitely take that out. And let's see, this one here is 5 minutes and 23 seconds. And it's a total of 12 hours and 18 minutes and 3 seconds for all the nights. And DeepSkyStacker does give you some play on how long of an exposure it'll combine with each one, because mine, since I've been timing them manually, they're not going to be exactly 5 minutes. It's like here on this dark, it says it's 5 minutes and 8 seconds, and I was going for 5 minutes on everything. And we'll go ahead and click OK. This is going to take a while. I'll pause it through all that, but it combines all the frames, gives them scores, and then starts registering them. One of the things that'll happen when you're taking a lot of images like this over a long period of time is you end up crossing the meridian, which at some time here I did it where I was on the east half of the sky and then later on the west half of the sky. So the picture gets flipped upside down. Now with some softwares you would need to rotate your images before you put them in there, but DeepSkyStacker is able to deal with that when it's processing, and it can rotate it 180 degrees for you. Now one thing I noticed was when I would have that happen, the finished image that it gave me might be flipped around upside down, because I guess that was what it was doing in the latter half of the processing. So we've got an image now, and just glancing at it, it doesn't look half bad. Now you can see here, I'll see if I can zoom in a little. And Notice here you got the edges there. There's crop marks. So each night the camera wasn't in the exact same position, or the center of the galaxy wasn't in the same position. And depending on how you have your settings in DeepSkyStacker, it can crop it off or it can leave it in, and I've got it set to leave it in. So I will find that setting and show it to you. So we go down here to settings, and we want stacking settings, and it's up here under the result tab. And if you have, I've got it in mosaic mode right now, which you can see here. Let's say night 1, which mine's obviously closer than this, but it gives you like a mosaic type image. A standard mode, you'd lose a whole bunch there. And then they have intersection mode. This is the first time I've noticed this. It just gives you whatever's common for each one of them. So I have it on mosaic, and I see it also offers some drizzle where it can enlarge it. There's a lot of settings on here. Some of it I've never even messed with. Comet, I used that here about 10 or 11 months ago when we had the green comet, as they called it. I was learning about different types of stacking, and this one here, what I found out something interesting when I was playing with it. The stars and comet stacking, the idea was it would register the comet and then register the stars and combine them, but when I did that, the comet came out in black and white. And I think under this one here, I'd have to look again. Yeah, I think it was, because the comet would be in color. And then I got into Starnet and removed those stars and combined it with the stars of this one, I believe. I had a stars only one. I don't remember everything, but I played with it and got it to work. So then I just need to save my picture to a file here. So I save it to a TIFF, and I've actually already saved it, but just put the name in there and hit save, and of course your location. And I've got it with no compression and such. So then we can open that up in Gimp, and I'm going to get it ready to run through Starnet++, because my initial image that I see in Gimp is not going to be processed like this. So now that I've got it opened up in Gimp, I like to make a duplicate layer. So I'll save my original one here, and I'm going to turn the eyeball off. I'm going to try to remember some good things here, and should name your layers. It's real easy to have a bunch of duplicates and you get mixed up if you don't. And also, you might notice that this image has been rotated 180. I'm looking at these 3 stars up here. They were on the bottom before. So I'll go up here to Colors menu, Levels, and right there my histogram is very narrow. So I'm going to go up here on the Input Levels menu at the top, the window there, and grab this center little triangle and drag it to the left. So what I'm doing is stretching out the area that goes from solid white to some form of gray. Well, of course, my solid black's over there. And right now, I just want to stretch this enough to get the stars showing up real good, so that when I put it in Starnet++, it'll be able to see stars to get rid of them. And then I will try to process it, just the galaxy itself. So I'll call up the colors and then levels again, and move this over a little. And of course, the more I stretch it, this will get a lot wider. It could get way across here. But right now, I'm trying not to get too greedy with it because I just want to kind of look at the stars it's going to remove. So we'll do another stretch on it here. And you also might notice the background color starts changing. But there's a couple of ways you can get rid of that. Probably more than a couple. So I'm starting to see a lot of stars in there. I don't really think I'm going to pull much more out. I don't think there's going to be a bunch of stars show up in these dark areas. And I'll darken up the background a little bit. And I'm going to save this out, or actually I shouldn't say save, I'm going to export this out to another TIFF, and I'm going to put the word Starnet after it. That's just my little way to remember what I'm doing right now. And I must have hit save. What a doom cough. Let's see here. Down there, export as. Okay. And I'm going to change this to add the word Starnet. And yes, I want to leave it as a TIFF. It's in the correct folder. Export. It brings up another window. I've got my compression set on none. I've never messed with any of these other settings. Click export. It goes pretty quick that time. Sometimes it can get pretty lengthy, especially since I'm using an older computer. So we will run this through Starnet and see what that looks like. I see one little thing I didn't think to do. When I make this down to a TIFF, I really need to go down to one layer. So I'm going to delete my original layer and then export it again. So now let's remove the stars in Starnet++. Here's the folder it was in. This is the application icon, which I've already double-clicked. I've already clicked Browse and found my file that I saved where I added the word Starnet. And then in the window below, I changed the name to Starless because it needs to have a different file name to output. And then I've selected this finer tiles, which is just supposed to give it more detail. Of course, it takes longer to process. Then I hit run, and this is going to take several minutes, so I'll pause during that. It will click it, and it should bring up a DOS type of box here. And as long as you don't see an error, it'll take a few seconds here. It'll start. There it goes. It says 0% finished. That means it's actually starting. If you get anything else on there, it's crashed out. Okay, so now it's done. Okay, here's my results after running it through Starnet++. Started off with that. And it does a pretty decent job of removing stars. It gives me this. Now, of course, you notice the sky here is green, and there's more than one way to get rid of that. I'm going to show you one little trick I learned from somebody on a YouTube video where you make a noise layer. And what I'm going to do is duplicate the layer I've got. And I'll name this noise. Then I go over here to my color picker tool. And I'm going to set one point for foreground and one for background. And I try to make it the same thing because I'm trying to have it all be one color. So I'll just go up here in the upper left hand corner and click, and it changed to nice green. Do the background one, try to go same spot, click. And now I've got a gradient tool, which, if you don't have it up there, I had to find it before, because this menu is all programmable. See, went to tools and paint tools, and then gradient was there. So that's how you find it if you don't have it showing up. And now I've got my noise layer selected up there, and I'm just going to drag a cursor right across there while holding down the left button. It gives me this beautiful all green color. And I'm going to change the layer mode from normal. Got to go down a ways here, and I find subtract, which is kind of off the screen. But I've changed the mode up here to subtract. And as you can see, it's subtracted out this color. And then you can decide, sometimes you decide you took out too much or not enough. So let's just, this case here, I don't feel too bad about it, but I'll show you. Change this layer mode back to normal. And the trick I learned, I'm sure you can do it more than one way, but I just go up to colors and brightness contrast, and I play with the brightness. If I want to take out less of this, I would just drag that brightness slider to the left some, darkens this up. That means I'm getting rid of less of that color, and that really comes into play when I'm using my full spectrum camera, because it wants to turn everything red. And when I've experimented, I've found I can actually get rid of some of that red background junk without killing the main image, just by using that darkness. So I'll go back down here, way down to the bottom, and find subtract. And that's got rid of quite a bit of it. And I'm also going to put this into a program called Graxpert that it's free, and I found out about it on YouTube, so I'll record a little thing on there and include it too, and we'll compare the two ideas here. But then after I got this what I like, I want to get it down to one layer again. So I'll go up here to my noise layer, right click it, get a menu, and select merge down, so it's going to merge that down into the other layer. And of course I didn't duplicate this one, that would have been a good idea. But anyway, I've got that, and then I've still got some junk down here. For fun, we'll just see what it'll do. I'll duplicate again, change this to noise, and get my color picker tool again. I don't know how well this is showing up on the video, but it's kind of a reddish color down there. And get the other color, go down to the same area, go to my gradient, drag that across. Turns it kind of a funny dark red color. It's kind of mostly black, but then I'll change this to subtract. And it doesn't look too bad, but I'm wondering how much of this I ate up. So I'm going to turn off the eyeball on noise, going back and forth. And I feel like it did get rid of some of the fainter stuff out here. So I'm going to change this back to normal and do that brightness contrast layer again. I've got to have the eyeball on here, don't I? And get the brightness contrast again. I'm going to drag this brightness back. And this thing here, it looks almost black. It's not solid black. It might appear that way on the video. And I'll go back down to subtract. So I took out less of it. And That's not bad. I mean, if you wanted to do this the easy way, that'd be a quick way to do it, and I can even take out a little less just to make sure, because I know I'm losing some of it for sure. So I'll chop that back in half or a little more again, and go back down to subtract. And yeah, I can tell the difference now. I can see that more of this faint stuff's coming out. That's really the main idea of taking a lot more hours of exposure. I've watched some videos where someone compared it, and a lot of the really strong signal that you see doesn't change much after whatever, half an hour or an hour or so. But then when you start getting this faint stuff, it's blending in with the noise background. So I'll save this out, and then I'm going to run that through that Graxpert, and I'll show you that. And before I do that, I'm also going to take an airbrush. I'm just going to pick this dark color. Way down here in this corner, I won't be getting anywhere near the galaxy. It's showing a little bit of that noisy color, so I'm just going to go ahead and knock that out of there. So I've selected my airbrush tool up here. I've got my opacity on 100. The size of it right there was only 84 pixels. I'll drag this slider over. I've got it about 350. That's not bad. And just going to sit here and paint right over that. And I've also merged that noise layer down into this, and I renamed it, so I've got a light times 2. And then I'm going to export this file as another TIFF with another name so that I don't lose that original starless one that I had. I think it was a really bright star or something there. Okay. So here we have this program Graxpert, which is good at removing gradients. And let me get this going here. Okay, so we'll go over here and we're going to load our image. And pick our starless. It'll load up for me. Originally, there's your original file. It's going to show a processed and a background. I have the set at no stretch, which was the default. I've got the display points checked, so when we click create grid here in a second, it'll show a bunch of little squares of where it says there's something to remove from the background. And you can play with the points per row and the tolerance to make it go in tighter to your object. I've got my interpolation method set on the default one. There's, I think, 3 of them. And click calculate background. There it's calculating, and actually does fairly quick. And this program does not work on Windows 7, so I did this on a different computer, and it's already done it. We'll turn off the display points here so we can see better. And I feel like really the noise layer one that I did before worked better for this object. Some things this program works really good on. So here's the background that it removed. So it removed a lot of junk, but there's still quite a bit left. And if you try to run it through Graxpert again, it really doesn't want to remove it. It's like it's already decided, so I'd have to remove it in another way. So at least for this item, I don't think Graxpert did me much good. I think it really has more potential if you have a lot of light pollution. If you have, say, a street light on one side that you just can't get away from and it's putting a glow out there, you can remove that. And here I'm trying to play with the tolerance. I'd already done this and recorded it on another computer that didn't have a microphone jack, so I'm just kind of talking along with it. But I decided to try to crank up the tolerance to get in tighter, and it really doesn't do it any good. And here in a minute I'm going to call up another file. It was a picture of the Pac-Man Nebula, and I was experimenting, and I made a really aggressive stretch on it, so it looked pretty ugly. And I thought, I'm just going to see what it does when I go to remove it. So you can see here with M31, the grid tolerance, it didn't really change anything. I'm sure in some instances it does. And we're gonna, I'm just looking for another picture I like, and I like one of them. It actually did pretty good on California Nebula too, but it wasn't really much different than what I had done just doing it on my own manually. So we're going to bring up the Pac-Man here, or scroll down and find it. And there it is, and it comes up, and as you can see, it's got pretty ruddy background, which this was a stretch that I did in Gimp, and I cranked up the stretch and just brought the nebula way up. So you can see there's a lot of detail in the nebula, and all those little spots of glow are glows around bright stars. Now I'm telling it, go ahead and calculate it, and it still leaves a lot of crap around the background, but what you see is that close to the nebula itself, it got rid of a lot of junk. And here it's going to show you the original. So you had this green cast over everything, and it got rid of that. Now I don't think I tried this particular one with my noise layer deal, but like I say, this program, I'm just kind of learning it and playing around with it, see what it'll do. So since I really like the result of this one better than what happened with Graxpert in this instance, I'll go with this. And I've opened up one of my, this is a TIFF from the first night, which that's what I had when I stacked it, a couple hours worth. And then I duplicated the layer and stretched it a little bit, and I've got a stars layer. Do select all, copy. And I've also, on some other stuff, done what I called a stars only set of exposures, where I did like a whole bunch of 30-second exposures, and I was only interested in the stars and didn't want any of them to be oversaturated and just blown out white. So we're going to paste as a new layer, and that gives me my stars layer. And I've seen a couple ways of doing this. Initially I learned to just go up here with the opacity and play with that. And as you can see here, this doesn't line up with my 7 nights, which I can move that. I'll do that in a minute. But I was playing with this a minute ago, and I'd heard that you can also use screen. So I'm going to change the mode of the stars layer from normal to screen. It doesn't look half bad. So now I'll go up here, and I've got my move tool selected. And I'm going to just try to line up the center of the galaxy there. And that's where it's nice not to have things all rotated out of whack. And Also got a feeling that this might be flopped 180 degrees. Yeah, I think night number 1 was actually flopped. To make sure, because that was that night there, I was only on one side of the meridian, and as I mentioned before, it rotates your picture 180 degrees. So real quick, like, I'm just going to open up the 7 nights file that says Starnet. So that's before I removed my stars. And let's see. Okay, yeah, there it shows this group of 3 stars up at the top. And my stars only one here is down at the bottom. So that's no big deal. I'm going to take this, and first I'm going to delete this one layer, the master layer, and I'm just going to rotate this layer. I'm not sure if I can rotate an individual layer when I've got the 2 of them already combined. So I will rotate this 180 degrees now and then paste it. Let's see here, I gotta find that, so I'll pause for a second. So we go over to the Image tab and go down to Transform, and then I'm going to go down to Rotate 180 degrees, click that, and it just rotated it. So I'll do my Select All, copy, go back here, delete this pasted layer, which was stars only. Let's see, edit, paste as, new layer, go ahead and name it stars, change it over to screen, and you can still play with your opacity if you want to. If you can work on the layers separately. I've got that relatively well lined up, and I can zoom in some here with my plus tool. Unfortunately, since I know this isn't lining up perfect, I may have to get it closer, I may need to do a little rotating. It's hard to tell whether the center of the galaxy is lined up dead on because it's just a little bright dot. It's pretty good. But since I took these pictures with my 300mm lens on the Nikon D50 using that homemade do-it-yourself adapter, I have basically the same camera angle all the time. Since I'm just tightening it up with little screws and wing nuts, it'll mess around by a degree or a fraction of a degree. But now I've got the stars brought in here. It's really not too bad. There's your stars only, or I'm sorry, without stars, you're starless. Bring the stars back in, and I can play with it. I notice this, it looks kind of reddish in the stars there. So I'm going to, a couple different ways. You can desaturate it a little. I'm going to go to down the colors to components, to channel mixer, and I'm going to go up here in the red channel at the top and use my slider on this red and red channel. Try to be gentle, move it a little and give it a couple seconds. Give it a little more, give it a few seconds to kind of process across the image. Now it looks a little more natural to me. If you wanted to, you could also do the noise layer on the stars. You know, if you've got kind of a funky green color or red or whatever, that'd be another way to get rid of it. You just got to be careful because sometimes it gets rid of the colors of your stars or your nebula or galaxy or whatever you have. So now I think I can go ahead and merge that stars layer down. And I'll get out my rectangle select to crop down to this size. As you can see, with doing 7 nights, how much excess I had, which it's nice to have that because it's really not always that easy to be dead on. I know some people that have really good equipment, and especially if they have an observatory where they're perfectly polar aligned every night, you can do a lot more. I just set up in my driveway each night and I get it reasonably close. Image, crop to selection. That way I try not to fight with it too much when I start setting up, because I've had some nights where I looked down and I'm like, man, I spent an hour, hour and a half messing with that, and I could have been imaging. So that's not too bad. I'll save that out as a TIFF and take a closer look at it. So I'm going to rename this. I like to call it combo when I combine my stars and a non-star layer. And I know I said TIFF, but I'm going to go PNG. PNG is what I use if I'm going to post it on Facebook or something, and it just makes a considerably smaller file. And I've made it down to 1 layer, of course, and click export again. And this one here, it takes longer when you export to a different file format, because I noticed when I exported before to TIFF, it did it real fast. But I'll pause because this may drag on for a minute or so. One thing to consider doing this, I just now thought about, was if I did a little bit bigger mosaic area of my stars only, that would help me if I wanted to center this more. So I noticed that some of this fainter detail of the galaxy is getting a little closer to the edge. So I think sometime along the line I'm going to play with that too, and that'll help me frame it up. Anyway, hopefully this showed you some things that you might have wanted to know about DeepSkyStacker and what you can do with an older camera and lens. My camera is, well, Nikon D50 is Windows XP era. So I'm not sure the exact date right now, 2003, 2006. The camera lens I'm using is at least 50 years old. It's a Nikon 300 millimeter f4.5, and it's a Series H. And I found it on eBay in decent shape, and I only paid like $60 or $65 for it. And I've been using it a lot. I really like it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video.